Hello, I'm Gustavo Tolosa, and welcome to the amazing online book club that I started over a year ago, in which we read books that have to do with whole food, plant-based way of eating. And not only do we read a book, but I have guests, I have doctors, I have dietitians, I have chefs, I have authors. Sometimes I play the piano for you. So it's I think it's a fun way to spend 45 minutes to an hour every week and keep connected and keep ourselves always learning more and supporting each other. I am a plant-based webinar producer and host, and I am also a professional pianist, and I appreciate that many of you support me in both endeavors, and thank you. So what are we reading? We are reading this wonderful book. You may have a different edition, but the main content is there no matter what edition you have. So Dr. Barnard is a wonderful doctor, and we are reading chapter 2 today, or discussing, we should say, because I'm sure that you have read it. I think it's important that you can get the book and that you can read it ahead of time, so that our chat, our conversation here is very, very good, and we can learn a lot. But before we start, I want to show you what I'm having for lunch today, and it's very simple. And you may wonder, okay, I'll tell you what it is. It's very simple, but very delicious. This is a salad that has cubed potatoes, white potatoes that have become pink because of the beets. Then you see the little cubes of beets that all of this was, cooked by me. I didn't buy the beets in a can, although you could. And it has little cubed carrots. So there are 3 ingredients: potatoes, beets, and carrots. That the beets were cooked ahead of time because they take longer, and I made them in the Instant Pot, but you can cook them any way you want. And then I cooked the potatoes and the carrots separately, and then I mixed it, and I chopped some cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, you can chop other herbs, or you don't have to put anything, or you can put some kind of seasoning. The only thing that I put on this was rice vinegar. You could put apple vinegar, you could put lemon juice, anything, and that's it. This is kale that I chopped in more or less small pieces, and I can't help but taste it. This is the kale, and I steamed it for like 2 minutes. Then I chopped about 4 garlic cloves. You could put more, you could put less. And I water sauteed. You know how to do this. Dry sauteed the garlic first until it got a little brown. Then I added the kale. And I don't know, everything, the kale is cooked. So I mixed it really well, maybe 2 minutes, turned off the stove, and then I put the juice of 1 lemon. It may have been a little less than that, but that's it. Starch and greens, wonderful. And then for dessert, I made these wonderful muffins. These are Chef AJ's banana muffins. And the only thing I did, because I'm going to take some to a dinner tomorrow, is I added some raisins. You could put any other, currants, or you could put cranberries. and I had some vegan dark chocolate chips, but I put very few. It was a very small number that I threw there in the dough, and they're baked. And oh, I have to refrain from eating that in front of you. Okay, so is that a lunch that someone who is struggling with diabetes could eat according to the book and Dr. Barnard? Yes. There is no fat, no saturated fat, no added fat, no oils. And as we will learn today, the main message of this chapter number 2 is that it's not sugar or starch the problem in diabetes type 2. It is fat, and we will see why. Okay, so thank you, everyone, again for being here, and let's get started. So this is the page. I'm on page 13. Page 13 and page 14 is an overview of the current approach by doctors and dietitians today of how diabetes, just the doctors usually try to manage, but in no way revert the disease, manage it, and it just inevitably gets worse and worse. And so there's more medication, and eventually then insulin, and organs, internal organs, the heart, the kidneys, even the eyesight. I mean, things get worse and worse. So those pages are important for you to read because it gives a good overview of the treatment of today in most, in the case of most doctors. So page 15, it says that carbohydrates do not cause diabetes, and it's in italics. And we need to really understand this. And we don't have time to read every single study here in this online book club that is presented in this chapter. These are major studies that are done by medical organizations and published in medical journals. So this is not information that is hidden from the doctors. Why is it not passed on to patients? If you find the answer, please let me know, because I don't know why. I guess according to Dr. McDougall, when I used to do the webinars with him, sometimes doctors underestimate the patient's willpower to stick to a diet change. So, or it may be that they just are too busy and they don't have time to be reading this new research. I don't know. But the research is out there and it's available for patients, for doctors, and for patients if the doctors would actually make it available. Okay, so on page 15, the third paragraph, it says that Asian men and women need not leave home for these changes. What he's talking about is that Asian men and women were pretty much in those countries, diabetes and cancer and many of the diseases of the Western world were either non-existent or in some parts of the country, or in other parts of the country, they were minimal, like minimal numbers. But what happens when these Asian men and women change their lifestyle to Western forms of eating and hamburgers and fried chicken and cheese and etc.? Then what he says is that as the Japanese diet has become westernized, the prevalence of diabetes has exploded. And it's and so this is something that I think is very interesting. I'm in paragraph number 4, where it says statistical projections suggest it will rise even further. It turns out that the genes that allow diabetes to occur are surprisingly common among the Japanese. But as long as they stuck to their rice-based traditional diet, the disease was mostly held in check. Very interesting, because yes, there are genes, and many people throw their arms and they just say, well, it's in genes. I used to do the same thing when I didn't know this information. On my father's side, there is diabetes everywhere. And I thought, well, at some point I'll have diabetes. But the gene can be there. But what will open the doors for the genes to actually get activated is mostly diet, like Dr. Barnard says. The diabetes genes lay dormant like seeds on dry soil. Once rice fell out of the fashion and Western eating habits took hold, the genetic traits started to show themselves. Okay, on page 16, there is a very good and very clear explanation of what's going on inside the body. So I'm going to put it in Gustavo's words, okay? There is something inside our bodies called the pancreas. And of course, this is an organ that is in our abdomen. So this pancreas produces insulin. Insulin is a hormone. Okay, so this helps me too. You know, I am a teacher. I think I was born a teacher. I love to teach. I've been a teacher since age 9. I used to gather everybody, all the kids in my family, and I would teach them to read and math, and then of course I've taught all levels: college, high school, elementary, everything. So this helps me to explain it and put it into words so that I also can process it. So that's why I'm doing this. I'm telling you that there's pancreas in our bodies, in our abdomen, and the pancreas produces insulin, which is a hormone, okay? And then the pancreas sends this hormone into our bloodstream to travel to all the cells in our body that need this hormone for energy, because all of our cells, every single cell in your body has to burn fuel and to give us energy. So this insulin is what gives us energy. So, but when the insulin gets to the cell, it says here, it attaches to a receptor on the cell's membrane. So you can imagine the cell around it, a membrane, and the insulin, the hormone, attaches to the cell's surface and causes the cell membrane to allow glucose to enter. And allow me to correct myself and say that it's the glucose, which is sugar, a form of sugar. We're not talking about table sugar. We're talking about glucose. Glucose is what gives us, the energy that the cells need. So insulin does the same thing for the next cell, and the next cell, and the next cell. It attaches to a receptor on the cell's surface. It opens the door and ushers glucose in. In type 2 diabetes, this system does not work properly because your pancreas does make insulin, and insulin does travel to each cell, Okay, so it's working so far. But when it arrives, it has trouble in opening the door. Okay, it attaches to the cell's membrane to open the door so that glucose can go in, and the lock is jammed. It does not open. The key is not working. The hormone cannot open the membrane of the cell. Um, Glucose cannot get into the cells. So if the glucose that is supposed to go in the cells cannot get in the cells, what is the logical step? Well, it'll just keep traveling in the bloodstream and it will keep rising. And that's why someone with diabetes gets higher and higher glucose reading, sugar levels. So imagine the workings of a lock on a typical door. What if someone were to jam chewing gum into the lock? There is nothing wrong with your key and really nothing wrong with the lock. Okay, we have to understand this is so crucial. And this is all explained in actual studies, medical, scientific studies, so that are presented in this book, in this chapter. So there's nothing wrong with the key and there's nothing wrong with the lock. It's just that it's jammed, it's filled with gum. To make it work again, we need to clean it out. So what is this analogy? What is the gum? Well, if you read the chapter, it is fat. When fat builds up, then in the cell or in the membrane around the cell, it will not allow the key to go in and open the door. Okay, so on page 17, okay, then he shows us some researchers at the University of Kentucky and then at the University of California, Los Angeles, that have done studies that, it's all related to this topic. I'm just going to let you read it. But on 1, 2, 3, 4th, on the 4th paragraph of page 17, it says that several years ago, my research team, Dr. Barnard's research team, began a series of studies to see what diet alone could do. They wanted to see if they could clean out the lock mechanism that opens the cell doors. So most of the people that were in this study, these participants, they were surprised to see rice and pasta, sweet potatoes, beans on the menu, and even more surprising that the diet did not limit carbohydrates at all. They just could eat as much as they wanted, and there was no limit on portions as well. So what they did, and this is on page 18 now, on the second paragraph, it says, we zeroed in on fat. We aim to clean all the grease out of the participants' diet. So there were no animal products whatsoever, and oils, vegetables oils were kept to an absolute minimum. And it was better if it wasn't used at all. So at the very end of page 18, it says that at the end of the study period, everyone weighed in. In just 12 weeks, the average participant had lost 16 pounds. Their fasting blood sugar had dropped 28%. Many of them were able to, 2/3 of the participants on diabetes medications were able to reduce or discontinue them in the short period of time. All this occurred without any limits on calories, portions, or carbohydrates, and without exercise. So these effects were significantly greater than those seen in a control group carefully following the diet guidelines of the American Diabetes Association. So the question is, why did this happen? So they designed another study, and that study is outlined on page 19 and 20. And so that's very important that you can read that. And I'm going to move on to page 23, where it says inside the cell. In discussing type 2 diabetes, I have described each cell of the body as being rather like a gummed up lock. Research has shown this analogy to be surprisingly apt. Indeed, insulin's ability to work is blocked by the accumulation of something within the cells, not gum, but fat. And then there is a wonderful picture here on page 24 that shows you the fat inside cells, how the fat inside cells interferes with insulin's action. It says on page 24, the muscle cells simply could not fully respond to insulin because they contain bits of fat, like gum jammed in a lock, rendering a key useless. How did this fat get there? Well, muscle cells normally store a tiny amount of fat, which provides an energy source for physical activity. The amount is normally quite small, and the fat simply waits for that date when you are much more active than usual and need a bit of extra energy. For some reason, in these young people, fat had built up much more than it should have, to levels 80% higher than in other young people. The fat buildup had reached the point where it was gumming up the lock. That is, it was interfering with the cell's ability to respond to insulin. And that meant that diabetes was very likely in their future unless something changed in a major way. I should emphasize, Dr. Barnard says, that the fat inside your cells is different from the fat around your waistline. Don't get confused with these two types of fat. One thing is the fat inside your cells, inside the body, and another thing is the fat that is, what they call the love handles, around your waist. Even if you are quite slim, you may still be accumulating fat within your muscle cells. And this is tricky because sometimes we see slender and thin people and we think there's no way that person can be diabetic. Well, yes, because the fat around their waistline and around here in the outside of the body can be one thing, but the fat inside the cells is what matters here. The participants in the Yale study were slim, averaging only 141 pounds. Well, I even wish I was 141 pounds. Well, no, I don't. Actually, I think for my height and my body composition would probably look like a skeleton. But I do wish I could be maybe 20 pounds lighter. And I know how to do it, so I'm on the task. They were young and healthy, but just as young people who smoke are setting the stage for cancer decades later, young people who accumulate fat inside their muscle cells are paving their way for diabetes. Again, if things were instant, of course, things would be so easy. If someone who was smoking, got an instant problem and maybe like instant feedback that they're about to get cancer, they will probably stop. But these things take time and they develop over time. And that's what, unfortunately, is the problem here. In a way, it's not, because it does take time. And so if a person decides to change, they have time to revert it. Um, until now, diabetes diets have not been designed to alter what goes inside the cells. Instead, they have been designed to compensate for the problem. So basically, the actual diets for diabetes are focusing on more or less the effect, not the cause. So because your cells cannot handle glucose, that is insulin has trouble getting glucose into them, the diets limit sugars and foods that contain carbohydrate, because when carbohydrate is digested, it releases sugars. But what if a change in diet could actually alter the fat buildup within the cells and reverse the trend toward gradually worsening insulin resistance? I believe this is exactly what we can do, exactly what you will do as you make the diet changes described in this book. But first, a few more details from inside the cells. And then he goes on to explain something very interesting, which is those tiny furnaces that burn fat. Okay, and that's on page 26, to even 25 and 26. Now, on page 27, I found the first paragraph there, to be one of the most powerful ones, because I have always believed this. And this is the first time that I see it in writing by somebody. So listen to this, page 27. Your body chemistry began to take shape many thousands of years ago, long before fast food restaurants and convenience stores ever got their first shipments of cheese and fryer grease. Okay, let's put aside any kind of personal beliefs here, whether you believe that our bodies are, humans appear on the earth 10,000 years ago, or 1,000, or a million. Okay, let's just say that we've been on this planet for a long time. And when we were, first here, there were no fast food restaurants, and there were no convenience stores. There were no supermarkets. So our human ancestors did not find fatty foods growing on trees, or at least not many of them. On the rare occasions when they ate fatty foods like meat and eggs, nuts, avocados, for example, remember, you have to use a little bit of your imagination. Just try to imagine this earth, with nothing of the things that we have today, refrigerators and houses and all those stores and factories. And so many of the fruits and vegetables, they were seasonal. There were things that you could not get until it was the season. They weren't able to come in a plane and be brought. We have fruits and vegetables basically year round because they come from other places, but that's not how it has been in most of the history. So their bodies may actually have tried to save some of the fat from these foods in case they needed it to power their muscles or food, or when the food became scarce. Because our bodies are amazingly designed, and like I said, this comes from many, many, many years ago. Our bodies were able to keep fat, because sometimes long periods of times went by without catching an animal or without finding much food. So fat was kept in the body. Thus, it would not be surprising if a sudden influx of fat in the muscle cells signals them to turn off the fat burning mitochondria and save the fat for future needs. Today, of course, that is the last thing we want in our modern era. We want to power up our mitochondria, which is those little furnaces that burn fat, and turn on those little furnaces to eliminate fat, not to keep them here. Well, can you get rid of this fat? Let's say you stopped eating fatty foods. Would intramyocellular lipids start to disappear? And so the answer is yes, but he describes a very important study. And yes, we are so spoiled today with the food that's available because we can get our hands on food basically 24/7, and we have ways to keep it so that it won't spoil. On page 28, which is the last page of this chapter, it says, I am not recommending that you have this procedure, and the procedure that he's talking about is gastric bypass surgery. I am presenting these findings to make a critically important point. The fat inside your cells is not a permanent fixture, okay? So someone with diabetes that has fat inside their cells that is not allowing insulin to open the door and get the glucose in, don't have to think that they're stuck for life. If the influx of fat stops, the fat inside the cells dissipates. And when it happens, the cells start to regain their normal function. These studies show loudly and clearly that the accumulation of fat in the cells and all the problems it causes are not simply a matter of genes. If we could just keep one thing today from this book club, from this webinar, is that you don't have to succumb to your genes. No, if you stop if you stop consuming saturated fat, that same fat that has been built up inside your cell and gumming up that log is going to disappear, but you have to stop consuming it. So genes do play a role, but these effects are very much a matter of diet too, and it can change dramatically. So this is such a powerful chapter. If you haven't read it, please read it, or please read it again, because that is the key. And I remember in the year 1999, when my father was very ill, well, it was 1998. He had to have quadruple bypass. He had had diabetes for many years before that. And I remember one doctor, one of the so many that saw him, and I happened to take him to this doctor. And this doctor said something that at the time it just went like this, but I remembered what he said. I didn't understand it. Unfortunately, he didn't explain it. If he had explained it, I am able to explain it, and I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor in music, but I can read research pretty well but I don't even have to be a doctor in anything. This is very easy to understand. If a doctor would explain to a patient that the reason that the insulin is traveling and accumulated in the bloodstream is because that glucose cannot get inside the cell because the cell has a lot of fat in it, and that they have to stop eating that fat, it would be a different story. So that doctor said to my father, And to me, that day, I remember it clearly. He said, the problem is not the sugar. The problem is the fat. And he said, just, be careful. Don't eat so much fat. That was it. I just wish it had been more specific and more, just really giving a clearer picture. But I do remember that. So there is great hope for people with diabetes type 2, and there is great hope for people with diabetes type 1, and that's in the next chapter 3. But now what I'd like to do is show you a video with Dr. Barnard. It's not very long. I think it's 15 minutes or so, but we can hear him, Dr. Barnard himself, talk about some of these things. So if you could hold on just a minute, I will show you this video.
Hi, I'm Dr. Neil Barnard. During the coronavirus pandemic, we have learned that certain people are at particular risk if they acquire the infection. Those are people who are over 60 or people who have chronic conditions, one of which is diabetes. Now, diabetes was bad enough without the fact that it can make you especially vulnerable to the effects of this virus. Well, let's have a look at diabetes and see how we can tackle that condition so that we're healthier in the face of this virus, but also healthier in general. Now, if you talk to people about diabetes, they might say, well, isn't that the disease that you get from eating sugar? What they mean is that sugar and carbohydrates will increase blood sugar. And so people with diabetes often avoid sugar and starchy foods like bread and potatoes and rice. But if you look at Japan in the 1960s and 70s had the thinnest, healthiest, longest lived people on the planet, and they had very, very little diabetes. What were they eating? Well, they were eating rice. Rice was their main dietary staple. Yes, they might have the occasional bit of meat or fish or other foods, but those were really just small flavorings for the rice or noodles that were the mainstay of their diet. If you looked at diabetes prevalence in adults over the age of 40 in Japan, prior to 1980, diabetes was rare, 1 to 5% of the population. But what happened in Japan right around 1980? You guessed it. Burgers arrived. McDonald's and the other fast food chains came into Tokyo and Osaka. People were suddenly eating fried chicken and other unhealthy foods, and by 1990, the prevalence of diabetes was now 11 to 12%. Genetics didn't change during that interval. What changed was diet. Well, who does better? We've learned something from the Adventist Health Study too. You probably know that Seventh-day Adventists have been studied by researchers for a long period of time. They're put under the microscope because, frankly, Adventists are a researcher's dream. It's tens of thousands of people who are non-smoking for the most part, teetotalers, very health conscious, but some of them eat meat, some don't. People follow different kinds of diets, and that allows you to see their effects on health. So in the Adventist Health Study 2, following almost 61,000 people all over the age of 30, it turned out that non-vegetarians, I'm talking about typical meat eaters, had a diabetes prevalence of about 7.6%. Better than the average person, but still fairly high. Then when we looked at semi-vegetarians, these were people who didn't eat meat every day, but maybe less than once a week. Their prevalence was 6.1%. Then pesco-vegetarians, what's that? Pesco fish, right. So you're not eating any meat except for fish. They were down to 4.8%, better, but better still, lacto-ovo-vegetarians, lacto for milk, ovo for eggs. So they're eating milk and eggs and not eating other animal products. They're down to 3.2%, but who does the best? Now, a vegan is not a person from the planet Vegas. That's simply a person who doesn't eat any animal products, and their diabetes prevalence was 2.9%. Compare that to all the other groups. The vegans had the least diabetes. So our research team decided to test out this diet in people who had never done any kind of a vegan diet before and see what happened. We brought in 64 women. They were all overweight. They had all tried every kind of diet, Atkins and South Beach and Nutrisystem and Jenny Craig, you name it. They tried it, and they were frustrated because whatever benefits they'd gotten from the diet just didn't last. So we asked them to join one of two groups, and they were assigned at random, either a low-fat vegan diet or a more conventional diet. And we had no calorie limits, no exercise, and they had to provide their own food. So the conventional diet was limiting the amount of meat, reducing fat, but it wasn't a vegetarian or vegan diet. For comparison, the low-fat vegan diet was just what it sounds like. It was no animal products, and we kept oils very low. The foods that we asked everyone to favor were embodied in what we're calling the power plate. That's fruits and grains and vegetables and legumes. What are legumes? Beans, peas, lentils, foods that grow in a pod. And when we showed our participants the foods they could eat, I've got to tell you they were surprised because they could eat pancakes. They could have linguine, as long as it wasn't topped with a meat sauce or Alfredo sauce, but oyster mushrooms, artichoke hearts, little marinara sauce, fine. When we bring research participants into a study, we don't just say, here's your diet, come back in 6 months. We actually get together every week and we meet and we work through challenges. And I think it was the third or fourth week of this study that one of the participants came in and said, Dr. Barnard, I found a treat that I can have on your low-fat vegan diet. And she opened up her purse and she pulled out a pack of Twizzlers. Do you know Twizzlers? Those little red twisty things that they sell at the 7-Eleven? It's true. Look at the packet. The ingredients don't have any animal products in them. They are vegan. It's just sugary, starchy, artificially colored junk. And she made sure that all the research participants knew that Twizzlers are unlimited in Dr. Barnard's diet. Anyway, so our low-fat, vegan, Twizzler-fueled participants set off on their path to the unknown. And what we discovered is that after 14 weeks, the people on the vegan group had lost almost 13 pounds, while the comparison group had lost only about 8 pounds. So the vegan diet was clearly better over the short run. But then we tracked everybody for an additional 2 years, and we discovered that the people who had adopted the vegan diet were skinnier at a year than at the beginning, and skinnier at 2 years than at 1 year, while the comparison group had lost weight and then they ended up putting it all back on. So it looks like a completely plant-based diet is actually a great way not just to lose weight, but to keep it off. So you might be thinking, why is that? How is it that a vegan diet could help me lose weight? Because you're eating carbs, you're not counting calories. How does it work? Well, the first reason is really a no-brainer. Everything you're eating is from a plant. It's beans and vegetables and fruits and whole grains, and plants have fiber, and fiber fills you up with effectively no calories. The second thing is that it's low in fat. Remember, we're not adding a lot of grease, and plants themselves are naturally low in fat. And here's why this matters. A gram of fat, no matter where it's from, has 9 calories. 9 calories per gram. But a gram of carbohydrate, wherever it's from, whether it's from bread or rice or even pure sugar, has only 4 calories per gram. So when I get away from those fatty foods, I get away from a lot of unnecessary calories. But there's something else. Your metabolism increases when you follow a plant-based diet. How can that be? Well, we bring the researchers into our laboratory and we're measuring their metabolism. The way we do it is they lie down on a table and we put a plastic shell. So you sort of feel like a space traveler. It goes over your face and your shoulders and it's capturing the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out, and it measures the oxygen that you're breathing in. And with some pretty simple arithmetic, I can tell you how fast your body is burning calories. But it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Your metabolism is really slow. Your body is not burning a lot of calories. But then I give you breakfast. Now, in our research studies, it's a liquid breakfast. We know exactly what's in it. And everybody's metabolism rises. It always rises after breakfast because your body is absorbing the nutrients in it to start burning things a little bit more quickly. Then you go to a totally plant-based diet. You follow it for another 14 weeks or so. You come back in. You lie down on the very same table. I put the very same shield over your face, and I'm measuring once again your metabolism. But what I discover, your metabolism is not the same. It's faster, roughly 15% faster for 3, 4, 5 hours even after the meal. Now, that's not much. It's just a small change. But it's after breakfast and after lunch and after dinner And even after snacks, you're burning calories a little bit more like you did when you were 14 years old. Your metabolism is speeding up. Getting rid of unwanted weight is a great thing for anybody. But if you have diabetes, it also means that your diabetes is likely to improve. So back in 2003, the National Institutes of Health gave our research team a grant to try to find a better diet for type 2 diabetes. What we did is we compared a conventional diabetes diet that was based on counting calories and limiting carbohydrates. We compared that to a completely plant-based diet. Now, the conventional diet meant limiting calories, carbohydrate fairly steady, don't eat too much bad fat. But the plant-based diet was completely vegan, no animal products. It kept oils very low. And one other thing, we favored what I'm going to call low GI foods, low glycemic index foods. What that means is, let's say I take some white bread. That will make my blood sugar rise pretty quickly. But if instead I have rye bread, the effect on my blood sugar is more gentle. It doesn't rise so quickly. If I have pumpernickel bread, the rise in my blood sugar is even more gentle. If I had beans, more gentle still. So the rye bread or pumpernickel those are more of a low GI food compared to the white bread, which is high GI, high glycemic index. Got it? So vegan, low fat, and favor the healthier carbohydrates. And to cut to the chase, the test that we look at to see how people do with diabetes, it's called A1C, or hemoglobin A1C. It's just a measure of your blood sugar control, and if you have diabetes, I'd like to see it below about 7. At the beginning, our participants were not below 7. They were on average right around 8. And the red line on this graph is the control group, the people on the conventional diet. They did well. Their A1C dropped about 0.4 absolute percentage points. That's good. That's what a medication might do. But that blue line, those are the people on the vegan diet. Look what happened. They had a drop of about 1.2 absolute percentage points. That is huge. If you had a medication that did that, invest. That is a great medication. But this is called asparagus, beans, and it's simply the effect of a healthy vegan diet. So how does that work? Okay, let me show you what causes type 2 diabetes. This is very, very important. If you're watching this with just half an eye, let me have your full attention for just the next couple of minutes. This big blue oval, that's a cell, one of the cells in your body. And your cells are powered by sugar, glucose. Glucose is a natural sugar that goes through those funny little purple channels into the cell, and the glucose gives them fuel, it gives them energy. But your muscle cells, your liver cells, they can't get the glucose into the cell at all without a key, and the key is called insulin. Insulin is made in your pancreas. It's a hormone. It goes into your bloodstream, it arrives at the cell, and it acts just like a key. It opens up the cell to let the glucose inside. Specifically, when the insulin arrives you see those red receptors there? Once the key arrives into the receptor, just like a key in a lock, it's now opening up those purple channels, and there's the glucose coming right inside. If you've got type 2 diabetes, you've got glucose trying to get into the cell, you've got insulin trying to let it in, what's gone wrong? The problem is inside the cell. You see those yellow blobs? That's beef fat, chicken fat, pork fat, corn oil, olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Maybe there's some 1040 motor oil in there. I'm not sure. That's unhealthy grease that's packing up the cell, and now the insulin key can't work because the cell is gummed up with fat. I'm speaking a little simply, but it's by analogy very much like if you arrived home and somebody had put chewing gum in your front door lock. There's nothing wrong with your key, but it's never going to open up that lock until we clean it out. Your cells aren't filled with chewing gum, they're filled with fat. Now, doctors hate words like fat. It's only got 3 letters. So we're going to call it intramyocellular lipid. Well, now that's a mouthful, isn't it? Intra means inside. Myo means muscle. Myocellular means a muscle cell. And lipid means fat. Intramyocellular lipid is fat inside your muscle cells that's making your insulin not work. And that causes a condition called insulin resistance. The muscle cell is not behaving. It can't respond to insulin. So what do? On a low-fat vegan diet, how much animal fat is there? None, right? And if I keep the oils low, what happens is the fat starts to drain out of that cell. It dissipates, it goes away, and now the insulin can start working again, like it did when you were younger. Researchers at Yale University did a fascinating study. They brought in 26 healthy volunteers, and they gave them a glucose tolerance test. Did you ever have that test? You drink 75 grams of a syrupy solution, and then we track your blood sugar over the next couple of hours. And some of the participants were what we call insulin sensitive, meaning when they drank this sugary solution, their blood sugar went up, but it quickly went right back down because the insulin was able to tuck the sugar into their cells. They're insulin sensitive. But there were others who were insulin resistant, meaning when they took in that sugary solution, the sugar was in their blood, but it couldn't get into the cells where it belongs because maybe something was gummed up inside their cells. They were insulin resistant. So let's look at their age. They're young people, 28 and 26 years of age in the two groups. And look, they were thin, 132 pounds, 141 pounds. And if you look at their hemoglobin A1Cs, this will not be on the test, but those are normal numbers. These people didn't have diabetes or prediabetes. They were healthy. However, then everybody went into a scanning device. The technique is called magnetic resonance spectroscopy. And now what we're doing is we're looking inside the cells of the body, and what we see is frightening. Here's the data. Every dot here is an individual. And if you look at the control subjects, in other words, those who were insulin sensitive, they had relatively low levels of intramyocellular lipid. They didn't have much fat in their cells. But look at the insulin-resistant participants. They had much more fat in their cells. And now we look at something else. Do you remember mitochondria from your high school biology? Those are the burners inside your cells. In the control subjects, their mitochondria, they were active, they were burning fuels as they should. And in the insulin-resistant participants, their mitochondrial activity was shut down. It was lower, meaning the cells were sluggish. They weren't doing what they're supposed to. So here's what is happening. These were young, healthy people. But fatty foods that they were eating were packing fat into their cells, making them insulin resistant. So even though they were young and they didn't have diabetes yet, if they were insulin resistant now, because of the fat building up in their cells, that predicts that they are going to have diabetes later on, maybe 15 years, 20 years down the road. It starts when you're young. So what's our prescription? No animal products, minimize the oils, favor the low GI foods. Now, I know what you might be thinking, that people imagine that on a plant-based diet, it's hard to know if there's protein in it. Well, it turns out that there's lots of protein in plant foods. Beans, grains, vegetables have more than enough protein, even for athletes. Calcium? Do you need milk for calcium? The answer is no. Cows actually don't make calcium. They get calcium that came from the earth into the roots of grass. And when they ate the grass, the calcium that had originally come out of the earth now ends up in their bodies, in their milk. And if you drink milk, you'll get some calcium, but you only absorb about 32% of it. Instead, have green leafy vegetables yourself. Hopefully not grass, but broccoli and collards and kale, great sources. Vitamin B12 is something that you should have. You need it for healthy nerves and healthy blood, and it's not made by animals or plants. It's really made by bacteria. And some people speculate that over the millennia in the past, the traces of bacteria on our soil or on our vegetables or maybe even on our fingers or in our mouths would create traces of B12. Well, that's certainly not the case today, if it ever was. Take a supplement. Go to the drugstore, the health food store, you'll see vitamin B12 pills there. Get the smallest one that they have and you'll be set. It's also in every multiple vitamin that you ever took. Now, there are a few special considerations that I want to mention. One is hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. I can hear what you're thinking. I've got diabetes. I've got high blood sugar. How could I ever have low blood sugar? Here's why. If you're using insulin or any of the sulfonylurea drugs, they are designed to bring your blood sugar down. But now you're switching your diet to a healthy, low-fat, completely vegan diet that also brings your blood sugar down. The combination can end up being too much for you. So let your doctor know that you're about to start a healthy diet, and your doctor can ratchet you back on the insulin or other medications that you may be taking when the time is right. Don't do this on your own. The second thing is hypotension. What's that? Low blood sugar. I can imagine what you're saying. Wait a minute, I've got high blood sugar. And you might even be taking medications for it. That's exactly the issue. When you're on a healthy plant-based diet, it's loaded with potassium, that's in vegetables, and that lowers your blood pressure a little bit. Also, when people go on a vegan diet, they tend to lose weight, and that lowers your blood pressure too. And so if you're still on all the same old medications, your blood pressure at some point can get kind of low. So you're sitting at a table, you stand up a little too fast, and you get woozy because your blood pressure is now low. Don't throw your medications away. Instead, just let your doctor know that you're changing your diet, and your doctor can ratchet you off your medications if and when the time is right. One more special consideration, and that's an anticoagulant medication that you might be using. It's called warfarin or Coumadin. And some doctors in the past would say, don't eat a lot of vegetables while you're on this medication because the vegetables have vitamin K that will counteract the effect of the anticoagulant. But of course, people want to have vegetables because vegetables are really healthy for them. Here's the answer. Eat lots of vegetables, but keep the amount fairly constant from day to day. If it doesn't vary a whole lot, then the doctor can find the right dose of your anticoagulant and things will be fine. And of course, nowadays, a lot of doctors are using more modern medications and they discover that there isn't any issue about their diet at all. So there you have it. We always want to get diabetes under better control, improve it, or even get rid of it if we can, and a low-fat, plant-based diet is the best way to get you there.
Well, there you have it. The author himself explaining it, and it was brilliant. So when Dr. Barnard says minimize oils, he is also including foods that have oils. So nuts, seeds, avocados. Just, if you're trying this now for the first time, just try to, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, try to not have any and see what happens. It is important. What he says is that you need to be under medical care because a whole food plant-based diet is a powerful medicine. It's powerful. And if you're not under the care of a medical doctor and your sugar levels start to drop, you need the medication adjusted. And you need to tell your doctor that you are going to change your diet so that he or she is ready for it. Okay, when this video goes out, it will have the link to this video that I showed you. It will also be in the description area of the video when it's in YouTube. And next, I want to share with you a little recipe. I also want to do a little announcement. It's very short, I guess, commercial. Remember that I do a lot of things for free because I do want to help you, everyone that I can reach. So if you ever would like to support my work, this is mostly what I do now for income. Please visit the website, which is plantemus.com. And over there, you're going to find some webinars that I have done. They have a very low fee, and they are full of original recipes that you would enjoy and that would be would go with this plan. There are also free webinars as well, so they're not all for sale. Okay, so it's something if you ever want to help me out in any way. In the next probably 2 weeks, I will do a very fun, unique webinar, a cooking webinar that I will call the priest, the pianist, and the chef. Why? I'll tell you why. Because my high school, my best friend is a friend from high school, from the high school days. and he became a priest, a Catholic priest. And I haven't seen him in over 35 years. And he's coming to visit me. And when he comes to visit, he will make with me, we will cook together. He's Italian. So he makes very creamy risotto. And I think it's going to be fun. We're going to see us meet after so many years, and you're going to meet him, and we're going to cook together, and then I will play the piano for you, and that's coming up. So if you want to be in my email list, if you haven't signed up for it and you never receive an email from me, my email is info@plantemas.com. Okay. Send me a message and I will include you. So now I want two things. Next week, or three things. Next week, we will probably have a guest, and I think you will enjoy the guest. Also, we will cover chapter 3 next week. We will probably have a live cooking demo as well. So make sure that you join next week or that you watch the replay. And now to finish, I want to point out a really good breakfast. This is on page 199, and it is the muesli cereal. And it is a very good breakfast option, and it's very simple. So what you do, well, you get the night before, you will combine 1.5 cups of rolled oats or any other rolled whole grain cereal, and 1.5 cups of water. So it's 1.5 cups of both things. And you will put that in a bowl and you will refrigerate it overnight. And then the next morning, or whenever you're ready to eat the next day, you will add 2 tablespoons of wheat bran. You will add 2 tablespoons of currants, raisins, or any other dried fruit. You will also add 2 medium apples with the peel, especially if they're organic, that you will grate. They need to be grated. And then 3 tablespoons of lemon juice. And that makes a delicious breakfast. So I hope you will try it. And at some point, I will do a cooking demo. I've done many, of course, but one of my weaknesses in life, if you want to know, is scones. Don't put me near scone because I will most likely inhale it. So I don't buy any. I don't go near one because I have zero control. So I have found a recipe that is very healthy, and at one point I will make it for me, but I'll show you. So thank you everyone for joining me, and I will see you next week. Stay healthy, and I'm going to eat my lunch here. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a wonderful week.